Coming up in this episode of TechSNAP, find out about a flaw in Facebook that is allowing applications to pose as you and read your private information, and we have a quick fix that you can make to solve that issue. Then, there's been new concerns raised around smart meters and the interesting information they can collect about you. We'll share all those details with you in this episode. After that, it's a story about some tech competitors that are normally fierce on the battlefield coming together around a common goal to fight a new law in California. And then we'll wrap up the episode with a new set of tech war stories. Allan shares the first one this week, and he's got one that he went to the trenches for to bring to you in this episode of TechSNAP, plus so much more. Hi everyone, it's time for TechSNAP, and my name is Chris, and joining me on the other line is Allan Jude. Hey there, Allan.
Hey, Chris.
Now, Allan, I'd just like to remind people as we get going on these early episodes, Allan is a former professor of network engineering and also the vice president of Scale Engine, which is a really awesome cloud hosting technology that you ought to check out. It's like sort of best of both worlds, something to Google for sure. But Allan, we've got an awesome episode, but I wanted to just kind of have a fun moment before we get going, if you will indulge me, sir. I just got myself a new OCZ Vertex 3 SSD drive, 120 gigs, so I couldn't really afford to go like big baller, but I'm really excited because guess what? What I did for Linux Fest our live Linux Fest Northwest coverage we did, I had to build an on-location rig because we have a pretty good setup here in the studio, and I didn't want to tear it all down and then sacrifice being able to shoot other shows right after Linux Fest, so I built a little portable streaming Hackintosh rig because the software runs on Mac OS X, and I'm not going to pay for a Mac Pro. And so I built this little Hackintosh unit, but the great thing about a Hackintosh is you can really triple boot it, dude. You can run Mac OS, you can run Windows, and you can run Linux. And that's what I'm going to do on this SSD. It's going to be my, I think I'm going to go Mint and Windows 7 on this guy. And then I'll have a third boot partition, which is Mac OS X. So that's really kind of awesome. That's what I'm geeking out on this week.
Yeah, I have the one generation older of the same drive.
And you like it? Oh, man.
Oh, yes. The
Dude,
128 gig OCZ Vertex 2.
It's a slick looking little unit, and check
Mine's
out.
Is that 2.5 inch or 3.5 inch?
This is 2.5.
Mine's a 3.5.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
bought that because that's the size that
the bay you want to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I have a little adapter thing that I'm going to have to use, but check out.
Yes, that's what I had to do for our servers for Scale Engine for the database. We used the Intel X25Es.
Oh yeah, those are nice.
About $500 for 32 gigabytes, but
super fast.
They're epic fast.
Yeah.
And they're SLC as opposed to MLC.
Right.
That's what the big price difference is.
And this is not. This is MLC.
For your OS drive and so on, you don't need the same durability you need for a database.
Check out the sequential access read speed though, 550 megabytes a second, and the write is also 500 megabytes a second.
And the biggest difference is the IOs per second, and the fact that with a rotary drive, when you're accessing 5 files at the same time, you don't get that sequential speed anymore.
Right.
With an SSD, you don't really have that penalty for having those concurrent operations happening at the same time.
Right.
Right. When there's no moving parts, you can read and write to 10 different files at the same time, and you get close to that 500 megabytes a second divided by the number of operations.
And that's why you always hear people talking about their boot process being so much faster.
Yes, exactly, because you're reading in all these separate files, and you can do it all at once without slowing it down. Whereas with your rotary drives, even with a RAID array, once your concurrent operations exceeds like 1.5 or 2 times the number of physical spindles,
right,
your performance drops off really sharply.
It's interesting though, because an SSD isn't necessarily the best option for like what we do with video recording. You know, where it's one single stream to one single file. It's still fine, but
right, a regular drive can do the sequential rate that you need without, and it's a lot cheaper for, a terabyte.
Oh, way more storage. Yeah, way more storage.
Oh, yeah.
But we're not talking about SSDs today. We're going to do an episode that covers, check this out, everyone, a couple of prime news stories, but we're going to go a little light on the news this week because it's also a war stories episode. But we're going to talk a little bit about that Facebook flaw that came out recently, and sort of a follow-up story with what happened over in the EU regarding tracking, only now this is actually taking place in California in the States. And then a really interesting story coming out regarding people's smart electric meters, which is kind of a fascinating topic. And then, Allan, I am fully prepared for your war story. I think people are going to get a kick out of this one. Before we get to all that, let's talk a little bit about this Facebook flaw that came out?
So this week we heard a bit about a flaw in the Facebook app platform that exposed your personal data and your credentials, actually.
Yikes.
So basically, with the older version of the Facebook apps platform, when an application was authorized by you to access your information, it was given a token, and it would use that token to act on your behalf, whether that was to read your data or post on your wall or send an update to your friends or invite people or whatever. The problem with that is that token was usually just passed in the URL string. And so when advertisers were advertising in an app, they would see that in the referrer field.
Right.
So then they would have access to that token, and then they could use that to access your personal information.
That seems super obvious.
Yeah. And this was fixed a long time ago, right? They switched to using OAuth,
which
has private and public keys, so that even if they expose that public key, without the app's private key, the advertisers can't read the data.
Gotcha.
The problem is that Facebook didn't take down the old way because there were like 100,000 apps that were using it at the time. Most of those have transitioned, but some apps are obviously not maintained, and so, or the authors just didn't want to, and they never changed.
For convenience or compatibility or whatever. So Facebook just allowed it to continue.
Right. And so with that token, then a third party could use that token, even though you only authorized a specific app. Anybody who got access to that token could access your personal information, write wall posts and private messages to your friends, send invites and RSVPs to events, and even access your photographs.
Well, and it's also, it's depending on what your friends' security permissions are. Like a lot of people have it set so that only their friends can view a lot of that stuff or a lot of status updates.
Right.
And
so
if that app can impersonate you, so it's your friends that are at risk too. It's not just you.
Yes. And so even though you only authorized one specific person and you have your privacy settings locked down so no one else can see it, you're authorizing this app to pretend to be you. And they're either accidentally or on purpose leaking this to advertisers and other people that can access your account.
So Symantec found this,
this is why you see the... yes, they did. Symantec found this. But this is why you see sometimes people's basically Facebook viruses that are installing themselves as an app and then saying to all of my friends, so-and-so hacked my account, click here so that you don't get hacked. And that's when it installs the app for you or whatever. Right? And you just see things like this spread on Facebook.
And of course, smart advertisers can just sit back and mine for information.
Exactly. They can use that information for whatever they want. Or
so is this
pictures
fixed?
of your friends in the ads.
Yeah. Yes. I've seen that.
Right?
I've seen that.
That's the way to capture your attention, right?
I have seen that.
I have seen look at the ad if it's a face you recognize.
I've also seen, like, if you go like a company's page, like say Coca-Cola, and then if Coca-Cola buys ads on Facebook, it'll say, Allan Jude likes Coca-Cola. You might too, or something like that.
Exactly. Yep.
So yeah, that's creepy. So are they fixing this? Is this still a problem?
It's still a problem, but they are fixing it. So these tokens were leaked by the referrer field, and other people would get access to them. So for quite a while, Facebook's had this problem solved by using the standard OAuth API, right, for authentication.
Sure.
And this uses public and private keys so that if the public key is leaked, it's no good without the private key, and that only exists in the app's backend. But they didn't take down the old one. So they've announced that the old method will stop working September 1st. So all apps have to transition to OAuth 2.0 by then. And on October 1st, they're going to enforce that all apps have support SSL and use SSL certificates.
Good. So that'll
SSL certificate.
That'll kick things like Firesheep in the butt, where people can sit in the coffee shop and snoop your Facebook session.
Yes. So Facebook now offers you the ability to go into your privacy settings and enable always-on encryption, and it'll do everything over HTTPS except for the apps, right? Because most app developers haven't bought an SSL certificate.
Ustream. Ustream. Yeah, and so neither has Justin TV's app either. They also, if you go and monitor them.
And the hilarious part about that is, like we talked about in the very first episode of TechSNAP, you can get an SSL certificate for anywhere between free and $12 a year.
True that. And you know what's the worst part about it is if you're using that app and it doesn't support SSL, it makes you convert your entire session. And it says just for this while you're using this, but it makes your whole session go clear text.
Cookies and stuff can't cross between secure and non-secure.
Makes sense. Like we discussed in the last episode.
Yes.
Interesting how that.
It's the same origin of policy applies to port numbers and stuff like that as well. So it stops secure and insecure cookies from mixing.
That makes sense.
So somebody can't read your HTTPS cookie over a non-encrypted session.
So I've read that if you go and change your Facebook password today, that breaks this and you're fine.
Yes. The SSL, or if you change your Facebook password, it invalidates all your old tokens, and so an app would have to request a new token.
And you could say no at that point.
Right.
Because now you're the boss. You're back in the driver's seat.
Right, and most apps aren't using it anymore. But if they leaked it to an advertiser and then they upgraded to OAuth, that advertiser still has that token to act as you. So if you change your password, it does invalidate all of their tokens, right? This is something that Dropbox didn't do with their tokens, right? Your hardware token wasn't based on your password at all. So if you change your password in Dropbox, it doesn't invalidate all the existing tokens.
I've been following Dropbox's forums, though. I believe they're working on some of these security issues, so I'll be following that for TechSNAP. Yeah. I think they're getting better about it. Do you want to jump to the next story or any other comments on that one?
One of the feedback emails we got was talking about a product that sits between you and your Dropbox and it lets you encrypt things before it goes off.
Cool.
But it's not an open source app, so I wouldn't trust it any more than I would trust Dropbox.
For when it comes to encryption, you want to know that that's vetted.
Yeah, because AES can be done wrong and make it useless. Right?
Regarding email, actually, why don't we just say this real quick? We got some email. We got some good emails, and we want some more. TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com because we want to do a Q&A episode. And we don't know what you guys might be interested in, but obviously we've got a lot of system administration background, a lot of server setup background, but we've got just any kind of tech stuff or stories. If you guys want us to give comments and thoughts on some news stories that have been around recently, send those in to TechSNAP at jupiterbroadcasting.com because we're going to do our Q&A episode next week, episode 6. So we want to get those.
So we'd like to get some short questions so as to bang through and maybe some longer, meatier ones.
Yeah.
That we really dig into.
And we'll touch on some of the good ones we've gotten so far already. All right, Allan, do you want to jump over to the do not track stuff that's going on in California? It's kind of also related to Facebook.
Yes. So Google, Facebook, and a couple other companies are all signed a letter opposing a new California law about the do not track system. Basically, the law it has the same problem as a lot of the other ones. They have no idea how they're going to enforce it. They're just like, the Attorney General's office will have to figure something out, right? And basically, technically, there's no way that they can actually enforce it properly. And it's unconstitutional because it's a California law, but it would affect
everywhere.
Any website that someone in California visits, right? And there are laws in the U.S. about interstate commerce.
Google and Facebook wrote a letter that said it would create unnecessary and unenforceable and unconstitutional regulatory burden on internet commerce.
Exactly. And their main point here is breaking down internet commerce is going to ruin the economy, right? It's the fastest growing sector of the economy. Why are you trying to stifle it?
Yeah. And
the other thing is, beyond the fact that it would never work, their proposed legislation would cripple advertising. And, how many of the services we use are supported by advertising?
Pretty much all of them at some level that are online.
And even the ones that aren't, advertising employs a lot of people.
It's an ecosystem,
right.
Unfortunately. And I think neither one of us are huge fans of ads, but it's the reality.
Right. But, it seems to make more sense to let the industry regulate itself.
Well, and what's the issue so far?
Don't let the advertisers regulate itself, but it's the browser manufacturers and so on are in a better position to come up with a solution than the government is.
I honestly, Allan, I believe that this is all regarding privacy concerns that have been stirred up by the Wall Street Journal, primarily regarding cookies. The Wall Street Journal had this whole series of exposés they did on internet tracking and how evil cookies are, and they use these vague, alarming headlines that to the layman sound like they know that that I'm Chris Fisher and that I'm doing all these things. And the reality is a lot of times it's not that case. And in the situations where it is that case, it's generally a service where you're aware that it has that level of knowledge about you because you have to provide that kind of information. And I think it's a lot of scare tactics that have gotten a bunch of people who don't understand how technology works all worked up.
Yes, exactly. And I think it makes a lot more sense to educate people and give people the tools in their browser to control their being tracked rather than trying to regulate it.
Yeah.
Right? Like all the popular browsers now have some form of privacy mode where it doesn't store the cookies between your session. If you're using that, you can't be tracked, right? If every time you close your browser, you appear to be a different person, then they're not going to be building up this profile on you.
Well, the advertisers can't build up a profile, but also things like I run Google Analytics just to collect trending information so that I can filter and say, boy, this episode of TechSNAP or this episode of whatever did really well on web traffic. And so that's a good way for me to gauge what my...
But not just that, you can tell how many people were viewing it from an iPad.
Right. So I need to know if I need to optimize my site for iPads.
But also, you can tell what time of the day people came to the site.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's like, we get most of our traffic during this time. Maybe we should aim to have the live shows during that time.
I know that kind of freaks people out, but if you think about it, like if you were coming into a theater to watch these productions, these would all be the same exact information that would be collected when you walk in the door.
It's just their ticket sales, basically.
Yeah. Only actually, it's less anonymous because there's no name and there's no face. So it's actually less information that you get when you go in the real world and go into places like this.
Right, because the real world, they have security cameras and they're tying your ticket directly to your payment.
Right. Yeah, when you swipe that credit card or exactly. It would be a major blow to us, and it would also be, it would impact the way like our, I would think, based on the wording of this, because it's vague enough, it could impact potentially tracking downloads, so we wouldn't even be able to know what episodes did well, potentially.
Yes, because some of the things that they want users to be able to opt out of having stored about them is the date and hour that they access something, the location from which they accessed it,
right,
and the device and operating system they were using, and their IP address.
Yeah.
That's basic information.
Which is all information that we use with our CDN, so that way we know if it's a unique person downloading, so that way we don't get like blowing out metrics if somebody downloads the same show 5 times.
Exactly. This information is very important, but also like, for example, the location from which someone is accessing it.
Mm-hmm.
That information is critical to e-commerce, right? If I get an order on the website that we run for selling computer parts, someone's trying to order, a $3,000 projector, and they want to ship it to Kansas, but the IP address is from Romania.
Yeah.
I need to know that so that I can ignore that order.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
Right? So this and just other behavioral information like that makes a big difference.
So where's this at as far as actually being put into effect and things like that?
I don't actually.
So it's just in the works now. I know it's something that's being actively. I know it must at least be at the stage where they can campaign against it, because not only was it
Facebook
and Time Warner.
Yep, and
Time Warner
also
Cable
the
too.
California Chamber of Commerce, right? It's not just these internet companies. It's basically anybody who sells something on the internet really needs this information.
Well, that's good. All right, so that's
right.
That's a good sign that at least they're into.
It makes more sense to let people control this stuff in their browser.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
You can set your browser not to send your GPS coordinates, right?
Mm-hmm. You could.
And that's giving. So then the store only has basic information about where your IP address belongs to, right? They know your ISP and where they are. They don't necessarily know where your house is, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're using an iPad or something, they have GPS, and if you have it enabled, they will send your exact location.
Yeah.
But what browser and operating system you're using, in pretty much any browser, you can adjust that to fake it if you want to send some other information.
And every browser has plugins and extensions to do it, too.
Exactly. And a lot of that information, it's entirely possible if you don't want it to get out that you can do that.
Yeah.
Right? You can use privacy mode. All the tools are there. You just have to use them.
Yeah. And
if you're that paranoid.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this one?
Not really.
Okay.
Just that the Federal Trade Commission and the Department of Commerce have always promoted the idea of letting the people that know what they're doing regulate. Right?
Self-regulate.
Yeah. Self-regulation isn't always good, right? We don't want the advertisers to decide how much they can track us. But if the industry as a whole of the internet, right, if the publishers and like the sites that are putting the ads on their site, they're not going to put an advertiser's ads on the site if it's going to harm their users.
Right, because otherwise that damages their business. So
right, because it's a whole ecosystem, right? You have the advertiser, you have the publisher, and you have the end users.
Absolutely.
And then you have the browser manufacturers in there as well. And the browser manufacturers want to offer these enhanced privacy features to their users because that gets people to use the browser.
Yep.
So it just seems like a place
it's
where
a system. It's a system that's taking. What your point is? It's a system that's taking care of itself already. It's already a system that's in place, already taking care of itself.
The government that doesn't know what it's doing, trying to impose laws that aren't practical, doesn't make any sense.
Right, dude. I agree with you. I'm on the same page. Let's shift gears. We got one more story before we get to the war stories. One more news story, that is. And this one's interesting because it's raising privacy concerns around smart meters. Now, the EFF brought this to my attention. I wasn't even really aware that I should be concerned about smart meters. Allan, now they're talking about protecting privacy. What's going on? What are the potential risks here?
Right. So the California Public Utilities Commission has proposed a new set of regulations to prevent utilities from sharing or selling smart meter data. Right? Because with that data, which can be measured somewhere between 700 and 3,000 times a day, at 3,000 times a day, that's every 15 minutes.
Oh.
They could tell things like when you wake up in the morning, right? Because you use less power when you're asleep, and then you turn a bunch of lights on and start the coffee maker when you wake up, right? So that'll affect your power graph. And they could tell maybe from your hot water heater, or if you have a smart meter on your water, when you take a shower, or when you leave and when you return from work, when you go on vacation, and all these different things.
When your grow lights kick in.
Yes.
Wow, I never even thought about it.
Right? So there's a lot of things you could tell from someone's electricity usage patterns.
Now, are they sending a data signal down that line to do that? They must be, right? Is it like it must be a form of power line networking in a sense.
Depends. Some of them are different. The system they use here, my local utility, is the various power meters have a wireless connection on a different frequency that they have licensed.
Yeah.
And a bunch of them in a community will talk to each other, and one of those will have an internet connection and send the data out.
What? They mesh network?
Instead of having to connect each individual power meter to the internet.
That seems so advanced for, is your electric company a private company, or is it a...
Yes. It's a private company.
That is really freaky.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, that really worries me for some reason. I don't know why. My power usage isn't that...
One question there is that data flying around in the open, right? It's probably not encrypted. And if it is, it's probably one master key or something, right?
Yeah, who knows?
So because it's not a hard line, that might be,
So it depends on the implementation, how they collect the data, it sounds like.
Yes, but there are a number of different smart meters that use a number of different systems, because obviously that system works well in like a suburban area where you have houses every so many feet or whatever, and you can do that. But obviously in a rural area, that's not going to make any sense.
Was there any comment on the fact that there's been no disclosure on if this information is in fact stored, and if it and how it's protected, or if it's identifiable?
I can go back and look at my power history. I can go to my power company's website, log in, where I pay my bills. I can see my power history historically, going back to like 2 years now. So all that data is there. They even give me the ability to export it as an Excel, as a CSV file, so I can do my own stuff with it if I want.
Wow. Well, I guess then you don't really have any choice how it's being stored, because it is already happening.
Right. Yeah. And so the main thing that the utility was worried about here is, if somebody decides they want that data, then what stops the power company from selling that for extra money?
Really? You think somebody might be interested in that data for advertising purposes or something?
Could be. On Slashdot, there was somebody going a little over the top saying that Google was going to start selling people free electricity if you would let them collect this data.
Ha!
They would sell it to the Girl Guides, so they would know exactly what time to come and try to sell you cookies.
Oh, isn't that funny? Yeah, that's a good one. I wonder if this data could be subpoenaed for any reason, like if you could somehow. Yeah.
That was saying one of the other comments on Slashdot was, if anybody's power is 2 standard deviations above normal, they might be subject to a warrantless search of their home to see why they're using so much power.
I wonder, the other thing you could start doing is tiered power pricing if you wanted, right? You could start saying, well, on average, you tend to be a heavier user on our power grid, so we're going to charge you a more premium rate.
Yeah, they have systems like that already.
Oh, they do? Jeez. Well, that's the suck.
If you buy industrial power in Ontario here, then there's tiered rates. For where I am right now, I just paid tiered rates based on the time of the day.
Huh. I think I should play.
The rates for the different time of day change based on the season, right? During the winter, power during the evening is more, whereas during the summer, power during the afternoon.
Right, I think that's true here as well. I think that's also true. I know they do a seasonal thing. Ours is ran by our county that we're in, and I think they have a bit of a different system, but it's kind of a seasonal thing.
Yeah, in Ontario, it's we used to have a public power utility, and then it was split up into separate companies. One company runs the power plants, one runs the grid, one sets the prices, and then local utility companies sell it to you.
Huh. Who runs it all? Is it completely independent? Each one?
Yeah. Yeah, each one is independent.
Now, your actual war story starts off with about a power outage. Do you want to kind of roll into that?
Yeah. Sure.
All right. Now, this is I think now if we do this, I think we'll probably do a series of these war. I know you and I both have a ton of stories, but
yes.
this one, I don't know if we're going to have time to get to mine today, so let's start with yours because it sounds pretty epic. Picture it. It's a hot Canadian wilderness August day, and Allan's got one job to do. He's got to move data centers. Lay it on us, sir.
Right. So we're moving from our current data center to a bigger one, and we decided we're going to do this over 2 consecutive weekends. So we'll move half of our gear and then move the other half after.
Sure.
Right. So we start moving the load over to the one half of our gear so that we can free up the rest, and we reconfigure our redundant router to act as the primary at the old location, and we'll move the main router to the new location.
Yeah, a nice controlled move. Hopefully minimize outages, things like that.
Yeah, and it's all going very smoothly, right? We have it all planned out. All the servers have modified running configs that are going to keep them up while we move, and they also have the boot configs are all set up for when they move. They can come back on there right away, already pre-configured.
Nice.
Right, so we got the IP addresses changed. Everything's going to go perfectly. And then I'd say it was about an hour before we were scheduled to get to the data center and start tearing things apart. The power goes out in a huge swath of the city.
No.
Yeah.
Probably because it was so hot, everybody had their AC on.
Something like that. I never did find out exactly what happened. But that's not a big problem. This is a data center, right? We have battery backups and generators, and it's all going to be fine.
Right.
Right. Actually, the power didn't go out where I live. I live on the other side of a major highway, so it's separate power grid. But anyway, I didn't know anything was wrong, but the power had gone out, and it's running off batteries. And that's fine, right? The system detects that, all right, we've been running off batteries for like 2 minutes now. The utility power doesn't appear to be coming back right away, so spool up the generator.
Yeah, you got like a system. You got a generator box that takes care of that.
Yeah, and so the generator comes online and starts generating power. Everything's going perfectly. And then it's so the system decides, all right, let's try to switch to the generator now. And it tries, but it fails.
Uh-oh.
It doesn't get any power from the generator. So it continues on the batteries and sends out an alert and tries to keep going. And it tries the generator again. Still no power from the generator. And
did you know why?
No. Well, we get to that in a minute.
Oh, okay.
To ruin the story.
All right, I don't want to... Oh, yeah, sorry.
Anyway, after about 12 or 15 minutes, the batteries are critical and still no power from the generator. And so everything goes out.
Oh, my gosh.
So up to this point, I didn't know anything was going on. I'm just at home getting ready for this big move, right? I'm packing up toolboxes and getting all ready.
Right.
And then all of a sudden my internet at home goes out because my internet comes from the same place that the data center is, right?
Oh, no. So you're like, oh, boy.
My home internet's out. I don't know what's going on.
Your mind starts racing.
I'm like, all right, my internet's not working. Okay, call up the ISP. Why is my internet not working? It's like, we've had a power failure. I'm like, okay. And then my phone starts buzzing while I'm on the phone. I'm like, what's going on? Oh, my servers are down. I'm like, hey, why is the data center down too? This is ridiculous. It's a data center.
It's a data center.
Right? And they're like, we don't know. We're looking into it. I'm like, well, shit. So the problem with this is it takes them about half hour more to get the power back online, but they do. The problem is all of my routers and servers were all configured to, after the next reboot, switch over to the new configuration.
Oh, no.
Yes. So they all have the wrong IP addresses, and particularly the, what do you call it, directory services that we use?
Yeah, like LDAP or something?
Yeah, we use something like that, and a bunch of the servers that were configured for the new data center, or the ones that were configured to stay, couldn't find the LDAP directory. So
offline.
they couldn't find a bunch of the users required for some of the services.
Oh, so the services couldn't start because they couldn't authenticate.
Right. And well, more than that, it caused a giant delay while it was trying to look it up. Right? It's causing it to take like 2 minutes to give up trying to map this username to a user ID.
Massive
so while
delays.
trying to reconfigure everything's taking epic amounts of time to do it.
Oh, no, dude.
Yeah, so it took a while to get everything back online. And then we still had to pull all our gear out, do some hardware upgrades on it, and move it all to the new data center. It was a crazy...
Did it take you a bit to realize that the routers had configured over it for the other IP space? And
no,
stuff like that?
I knew right away because I configured them to do that.
Oh, yeah.
The power wasn't supposed to go out. It's a data center.
Right.
What the hell?
It's funny, data center power outages tend to be a common little issue. Just little blips here and there sometimes can happen. And
well, I remember Rackspace had a big problem with that. It was one of the first times they had such a big problem. I think in the end they had to give out millions of dollars in refunds.
Whoa, really?
Yep. Because it took out like everything. It was some problem with their UPS, their battery backup system.
So,
which is the part that's supposed to keep the power on. When it failed to get the generator power. And then they had a second event like 2 days later while trying to fix it.
Oh, man. Kick them while you're down.
I'll throw a link for that in there, but it was one of the first stories I did at AppFail.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
We talked a bit about how Google's, in their setup, they put a separate battery in each computer so that they don't have that single point of failure.
Was that episode 1 of TechSNAP? We talked about that?
I think it was 2 when we talked about the Facebook data center design.
So you have your outage. Did you were you able to get on the road to recovery pretty quick, or what was the situation?
Yeah, it just basically delayed our move by about 2 hours while we had to scramble around and fix everything so we could move.
So why didn't the backup power work properly?
Right. So it took them about a week to finally deliver the root cause analysis, but it turns out that when the local ISP had got bought out by a big national about a year before, and they decided they weren't interested in doing data center anymore, and that's why we were moving. They had chopped down all the good transit and replaced it with cheap transit, and were kicking us out, basically. But also, they weren't keeping up the routine maintenance on the generators.
Well, because they were done with it. They
weren't interested in anymore. It turns out that the power transfer cable that goes from the generators to the battery backup banks had corroded and needed to be replaced.
Oh, that's some serious neglect.
Right. And so, the power couldn't get from the generator to the UPS battery banks, and so it couldn't be delivered to the servers.
What a stupid, well able to plan for thing to bring down your whole data center.
Yeah. And the other problem was, because they were closing off the data center, they had already scaled back the staff. So they were understaffed to deal with a catastrophic power failure like this. Right? So it took them, and they were more concerned getting all their cable customers back online than the data center.
Right. Yeah. And so as with any good war story, Allan, did you have some lessons learned from this? Like, I know there's not a lot since it wasn't directly under your control, but you can always take away something, I figure.
But part of it was that don't change your boot configs early.
Yeah.
The whole point of having a running config and a boot config is that you use the running config to test the change and make sure it works. And in case it doesn't, you can just reboot and it goes back to how it was before. This is extremely important if the hardware is remote. Right?
Yes.
Because if you make a change that makes it inaccessible, you can't, you don't have physical access to fix it, right? You have to get someone to go do it. And you could be lucky that if all you have to do is get a power cycle, it's a lot easier than trying to get someone to log into a terminal with a password they're not supposed to have or something and reconfigure it.
Oh my gosh, do I know that one. My war story has a lot of that. But you know what? I think I'll save it. I think I'm going to save my war story for next week's episode, because we'll do the email episode. And then if we have time left over after the emails, I'll share my story. Because it's actually, about 2 hours before I came out to do the show, was just recovering from a week-long outage that I was working on. Well, not a week long, since Monday morning, and it's Thursday when we record this. And I'm still actually doing like the analysis of what happened.
The files analysis.
I got to get to all of that, but so I think I might share that in next week's episode because it was pretty epic.
So the other couple things we had were our internal directory services need to be redundant, so that if it's down, we don't have that giant delay with all the commands you're trying to run. That made a big difference. Make sure your SSH server doesn't wait for DNS. That makes a difference.
Oh yeah, to reverse lookup on the client.
Some of them will sit there and wait for 2 minutes trying to resolve your host name before they prompt you for your password.
Right.
And you don't really need that. They can do it asynchronously.
You know what? I should do that on mine. It's just annoying anyways to wait sometimes.
Exactly. And if you don't boost your timeout high enough, then sometimes it takes longer than the timeout, and it just tells you to screw off.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one is, if the data center is going downhill, get out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, right.
Right? We were one of the first customers to leave because we had called a bit earlier about getting more space, and they told us, no, we don't want your money.
You got to go with your gut on those.
We would have been much happier if we had moved 2 weeks earlier.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes it's hard to make the right call, especially if you've been there for a while, and moving is no minor task.
We've been there for a while, and it takes a while to get set up somewhere else, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And
we really liked this data center because it was a block from my house. When shit went wrong,
you can walk. The thing too about moving data centers is if you don't kind of have some way to if you don't architect it in a way from the beginning, you might be looking at just a total downtime while you move. You were lucky in the sense that you could redirect traffic.
Customers that ran a single dedicated server had that problem.
Yeah.
So they got to pick which weekend they were down. For Scale Engine, because of the cloud type nature of it, it was not a big deal to take out half the capacity.
Right. It just reallocates.
We were a bit worried if somebody got a giant traffic spike during the move that we wouldn't have the capacity for it. But
yeah, you got lucky.
But we have a lot of spare capacity. So.
Gotcha.
We could still handle all of our load on a third of our hardware. So.
I got you. All right. Well, that's good. That's good. Anything else on that one? I love that one.
Nope. That's that story.
Talk about a double whammy, man.
Make sure that your data center is keeping up the maintenance on all their stuff.
Yep.
And also, if you're going to reconfigure your stuff, make sure that something unexpected happening isn't going to ruin everything. Don't
commit until the very last possible moment that you have to.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, boy, isn't that the truth? Well, so let's talk a little bit about some things about the show. So first of all, we post every Monday morning over at jupiterbroadcasting.com, and we do it live as well. And you can join the live chat room and hang out with folks and who comment on our stories as we go, and I like to read the chat room and see what they're saying. But we do that at jblive.tv, and that's at 1 p.m. Pacific right now, though we might be moving that, so just go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar to see when we're doing the TechSNAP live. And, of course, send us in your questions, because we're doing a Q&A episode, and your show thoughts and story suggestions to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com. And also check out facebook.com/TechSNAP, where we're posting information about the show and things like that there as well. It's the Facebook group for all the stuff related to the show.
Yes.
And then I guess What's that?
We need questions for a question episode next week.
Yep, you could also post them over there at the Facebook page if you like. And one last piece of business is we do have RSS feeds for this show. This is a great commuter show if you want to listen in audio form, and you can find RSS feeds and downloads for that over at jupiterbroadcasting.com, as well as also portable video versions and tablet versions and all kinds of stuff, as well as HD versions. Right, Allan?
Yep.
Anything else we want to cover in this episode?
No, I think that's about it.
All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning to this episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next Monday.